I'd like to invite you into conversation about an experience that's not that uncommon for therapists. And that is that a client is disappointed in you as a therapist. Now, that's a very unpleasant experience, but it actually happens. And how do you, as a therapist, sit in your own therapist seat and be with that experience? I'm Manuela Mischke-Reeds. I'm a somatic psychotherapist and have been practicing and teaching somatic psychology for over 25 years. I'm a Hakomi trainer and therapist. I'm also a Continuum Movement teacher, a movement therapist. I've done expressive arts therapy, and I combine somatic trauma therapies such as somatic experiencing and Hakomi and other modalities with movement, expressive arts, and systems thinking. I also mentor a lot of psychotherapists, often very seasoned therapists with a lot of clinical experience and expertise. And they come to me sometimes asking, I don't know what happened with my client. They seem disappointed. I don't really know why. Or the client says, this doesn't work for me, or something that you did, or technique doesn't work. I'm disappointed in the skill set that you delivered, or this is not working for me. So there might be many different cues that the client gives, but the end result is, this is not working for me, and I'm disappointed in you. And that's quite a blow for a therapist. As therapists, we pride ourselves to be very sensitive, very attuned. We're well trained. We have all these techniques at our disposal that we use. And then we try all these things, and then the client says, it's not quite right for me, or I don't like it. And there's criticism or judgment coming our way. One common experience that I've seen with the therapists that I've consulted and counseled is that they often kind of fall into a shame response. It's like, I'm not good enough. I didn't do the right thing. I used the wrong technique. And they're kind of collapsing. But what's often not happening is that the therapist is actually working in the moment, in the work, in their own therapist seat. That is an artful training. You actually need to train for working and recognizing your own internal state while you're with the client. So if disappointment comes your way, or could also be anger or irritation or frustration, any of these very unpleasant experiences, when that comes your way in the therapist seat, you have the capacity to both be with it, but not be with it as holding and getting stagnant, but rather be fluid. Most therapists are very familiar with that concept of holding space for the client or being very still like a mountain. And that often is a kind of rigidity and a sometimes even freezing in the therapist. It can have a beautiful quality of being very grounded, but often what happens for a lot of therapists is they become so still that there is not much fluidity and engagement and creativity and metabolizing of what's actually going on. So what I'd like to refer to is the fluid presence. So presence has in itself, like you're presencing the moment, there is a stability in that and a focus, but you're also being fluid. And this is an idea, a concept, and a lived experience really that I've learned from Emily Conrad and Susan Harper, founders of Continuum Movement, a beautiful body of work that looks at underneath a story and looks at what's lived experience in the body through movement. How I began the work in somatic healing and trauma healing was really through my very early experiences in my internship a long time ago in San Francisco General Hospital, where I was given a group of political torture survivors. The first group that I actually had were from Cambodia and from Vietnam. And it was a big group of men. And there were language barriers and cultural barriers, and I was literally the only female in the room. And I began to explore really what had happened to these bodies that were tortured so dramatically. I discovered that the body is very resilient, and the body holds a lot of wisdom. And even though these were unspeakable horrors that these clients had experienced, that there was something inside that was innate, that they began to tap into through these body practices, breathing, moving, drawing, sensing, feeling, all these avenues of coming into the somatic experience. I began to see how these survivors began to come alive. Something sparkled. And it was very inspiring to me. It led me to really understand that underneath the trauma is something else. Yes, there's psychobiology, but then there's something underneath that's so innate in all of us humans that has to do with hope, resiliency, and a fluidity that's beneath these traumatic experiences. It also led me to really understand what happens to the therapist. I began to feel in my own body the residue of what it means to be in the presence of trauma, systemic trauma, collective trauma, intergenerational trauma, historical trauma, political trauma. There were so many layers of it that I was actually absorbing without even fully understanding it at the time. I didn't have the repertoire. But it informed my work. It informed my work because I learned from my own experience and my own difficulty with it that I needed to find some other resources. So a body of work that really, really helped me was Continuum Movement. It was with the work of Emily Conrad and Susan Harper that I began to understand that there is a deeper narrative in the body that has nothing to do with the story of who we think we are. But who we actually are is movement. We are liquid, watery beings. And it's underneath, like a river beneath us in our nervous system that resides always through time. And it's an incredible resource that we can tap into. And it's been really my investigation over these last 2 decades to how can I bring that knowledge to clients that they can tap into this deep reservoir so they can not just identify with what happened to them and the complexities of their lives, but actually reconnect something so deep, innate in them that no trauma experience can actually touch. And I saw that in these political torture survivors. One vivid story is I worked with some refugees from Nicaragua at that time, and she was recounting, and I will not recount the details, but she was recounting of how she was tortured. And she said to me verbatim, she said, "They can break my bones, but they can't break my spirit." So when disappointment comes, the client says, I really didn't like this, or I'm disappointed in this therapy, I'm disappointed in you, you're not really meeting me, you're not matching me, however they're languaging this. Can you invite in that moment a spotlight on that experience as the therapy itself? Can you in that moment say, "Hey, let's just be with that. You're really disappointed. Let's just open up that space around disappointment." I really hear that. So you're validating the client's experience, but at the same time, you're not taking it personal. So I'm literally shifting and moving and recognizing my own inner states, and then I'm being with this experience and inviting the depth of it, and I'm allowing the experience of disappointment. Is it okay for you as a therapist to be a disappointment? Can that be part of it? A lot of therapists cringe when I say that. And they go, "Oh, I'm not so sure about this. I don't want to be a disappointment." But can that be part? Because this is part of human experience. So can I invite that in? Can I be fluid with it? We are water. We are a fluid organism. And as long as we stay connected with that fluidity within, we are actually very actively engaged in this change process and the change process that we are engaged with our clients. So nothing gets static, nothing is held, nothing is kind of solidified. When we're kind of in more of a fluid presence, we're beginning to open that up, and then we can be with experiences like disappointment, anger, different kinds of trauma arousals. All these experiences are allowed to be there because we're not holding on to anything. Nothing gets identified. It keeps moving along. And that in itself is actually a resolution to trauma. So I'd like to give you a taste of what I mean by fluid presence. It's kind of difficult to explain. It really is an experience that we drop into and that we actually already know in our body. We all have the capacity to be in fluid presence. We just have forgotten how to access it. So let's just do a practice together. And you can do this seated. I'm going to do it standing right now, but you can do it seated or standing, whatever is comfortable for you. And take a moment and take a baseline in your body. And notice how your body is, just receiving your soma as it is. Taking a moment to shift your awareness inside, and you can cast your eyes down or close them, whatever is comfortable for you. And as you're making that conscious shift to your internal soma experience, just notice what you're finding. And see if you can have an open attention to how your body is responding to this moment. Noticing the quality of your breath. Notice the rhythm of your breath. noticing the sensations that are in your body. And then I'd like you to do a very, very small little movement, either at the base of your spine, could be in your sacrum. If you're standing, it's really helpful to kind of a standing position to basically create a little undulation in the base of your spine. If the base of the spine is not accessible, you can do the same thing with the beginning of the spine, the first few vertebrae, just a tiny little movement. We're talking a very small undulating movement. As you're beginning to do this little undulating movement in the spine, notice how your breath is shifting and changing. And study that. As you're feeling that small little micro movement undulating in the spine, you can let it grow throughout the spine. If you're starting at the bottom, it might grow upward. If you're starting at the top of your spine, it might grow downward. It doesn't matter really. You're initiating a very primordial movement that is the fluid movement in the body. So feeling that. And the less effort you use, the better. So really feel that. Close your eyes and sensing into that micro fluid movement riding through the spine. Just a little bit. And it's kind of a re-remembering of a primordial knowledge that's actually existing in your body. Couple more moments and feeling that fluidity. Again, it could be as if the tail, your sacrum are moving in a watery, seaweed-like fashion. And then traveling up the spine. Or from the neck down. Or you might combine them even. So be creative. See how your body responds. You're invoking the fluid presence in your body. And then pause the outer movement and receive your soma as it is right now. Notice what's actually happening. Chances are you're actually feeling a fluidity that keeps going. You might feel some even more micro movements deep inside. Maybe you feel like there's a swimming sensation or a kind of liquidity or a shimmery quality. That is the fluid presence. So feeling that. And now imagine that you're sitting with this awareness of the fluid presence in relationship with your client. What becomes available? What is possible between the two of you? And what's possible within you as you're meeting trauma, stress, difficulty, or the client being disappointed with you? Thank you for your practice. As you noticed, you are going through a state shift. So when you're going into the fluid presence, you are shifting now into a much larger reservoir of who you are. It's actually without a story, it's without a narrative, and it's actually without an identity. You are simply present. And there's all these possibilities. And what happens between you and the client, there's a lot of creativity, and you're beginning to perceive the client very differently. They're not just the pain, they're not just the story, they're not just the experience of being disappointed in you. That is just a experience. And then what else is actually here? What else wants to happen? It opens up a much wider lens and possibility of what can actually occur and wants to occur. And this is where, as therapists, as somatic therapists, we actually go into what I would like to call a mystery process. Because truly, at the depth of any good trauma healing, there is an element of mystery to it. We don't really know what truly heals. The therapist seat that you just experienced is part of a more comprehensive body of work that I created over the last 25 years. It's really the foundation of many elements that go into how to become a more effective somatic psychotherapist working with trauma. If you like to study further this approach, working with trauma somatically, and really understanding the role of the therapist seat along with the skills and practice, what it really means to help a client transform their trauma stories and their experience, we have put together here a course at Academy of Therapy Wisdom to help you dive further and really get some skills and practice of how to deliver that. In this course, we are going to be learning about how to access innate somatic intelligence for trauma healing. These are 5 modules I'm going to be guiding you through where you're going to be learning some really key elements of this method. We're going to be starting with innate somatic intelligence, where we're going to be learning about what it is and how you can recognize it in the client and how to actually call that forth in the client, which will help you to further the unfolding process in the client. We're also going to go more in depth in what it really means to be in the therapist seat. I gave you a little preview and understanding of the concept of it, but then actually how do we cultivate it? How do we practice it? What are some effective practices to cultivate this fluid presence? And then we're going to talk about the third module about what it means to access the fluid self in the client, and then working with trauma states. Trauma states create trauma parts. Parts really have their own somatic signature, you can say. They have an expression in the body, a tone of voice, they have a movement, they have a whole life in itself that we need to, as somatic therapists, begin to recognize, and to have the client begin to recognize it so they can actually transform it. In the fourth module, we're going to look at moving beyond trauma states. And this is one of my favorites where I'll really be bringing in a lot of the work of continuum and subtle intrinsic movement with impulses, how to recognize it in the body, how to facilitate it so that you feel confident to work on these very subtle levels with your client. It takes a lot of somatic tracking and really learning how to look through movement eyes and perceiving the body as a moving, living organism that you can help facilitate move through these trauma states. We're going to conclude the course with the embodied coherent self, where we're integrating all the material that we're learning so that you can help the client to integrate these experiences, having moved through a full transformation of moving through the trauma states, and then also beginning to really embody the new change. And then how can they bring their changed self, their changed understanding of the experience into life, into action? So how is my own trauma story benefiting others? How is my own transformation of trauma healing really contributing to not just my own thriving life, but enriching the lives of others, my family, my community, my society, and so on? It could be small, could be large. I'd like to invite you to join me in this course and exploring the deeper healing that can happen when you drop into somatic work. Trauma can be a gateway to healing individual and collective experiences, and they're very powerful when you begin to really understand what the lived experience in the body is for yourself as a therapist and also for the client, and how you can open up into new possibilities of healing. Thank you for all the work that you're doing with your clients. I know that this is not an easy job, healing trauma, and it takes a lot of resilience and dedication. So really, truly, thank you for what you're doing. And I hope that you will join me and we will have some interesting conversations and experiences together.